In the dying age of the Imperium, as faith rots and chaos devours the stars, the Emperor faces a choice darker than death itself. In the silence beneath Terra, he uncovers a forbidden path, ancient Necron technology, cold and perfect, untouched by the warp. Desperate to save humanity, he embraces it. Flesh turns to metal, souls to data, prayers to static. The Astronomicon dies, chaos fades, and the warp itself grows silent. Humanity survives, but without emotion, without faith, without soul. The Emperor sits upon not a golden throne, but a tomb of living metal, his eyes burning green. He has saved mankind by erasing what made them human. And in that endless silence, one question haunts the void: was it worth it? For 10,000 years, humanity has lived beneath the shadow of a corpse. A God who neither speaks nor sees, whose golden light burns not from mercy, but from the machinery that sustains his death. The Imperium of man, once a dream of unity, progress, and survival, has become a mausoleum of faith. Every cathedral, every hive city, every shrine world hums with the sound of endless prayer. Yet none are heard. The people of the Imperium do not live, they endure. Billions toil in darkness, their only comfort the illusion that their suffering pleases a divine emperor. Priests chant until their voices bleed, servitors grind their bodies to dust, and soldiers die nameless deaths upon worlds the Imperium will never remember. The light of the Astronomicon flickers in the warp, but even that light feels sickly, now fading like a candle drowning in its own wax. The truth is simple and horrifying. The Emperor's dream has become his prison. The Imperium's faith, once its greatest strength, now smothers it. On Terra, the skies are black with ash and incense. The smell of burning offerings mixes with the stench of decay from the endless tombs that line the city's depths. Pilgrims crawl across the dust, blindfolded, their tongues cut out in ritual silence. The ecclesiarchy preaches louder than ever, their sermons more desperate, their faith more hollow. They shout to fill the void left by a God who has stopped listening. Yet, beneath the surface, whispers grow. In the lower hives, among the workers and the forgotten, people begin to doubt. They dare not speak it aloud, but they feel it, the silence. Their prayers no longer bring comfort. The icons of saints seem dimmer. The miracles have stopped. And though the priests blame heresy, sin, or demonic influence, the truth is simpler. The Emperor is fading. Psychers across the galaxy scream in their sleep. Astropaths weep blood as the Astronomicon weakens, flickering like a dying star. The warp itself seems uncertain, its storms wilder, its paths unstable. Imperial fleets vanish in transit. Entire worlds go dark, their last transmissions filled with static and whispers of something moving through the void, something ancient and cold. The Adeptus Mechanicus sense it too. Deep within the forges of Mars, the Omnissiah's presence falters. The machine spirits grow restless, their binary prayers unanswered. Some magi speak in secret of a silence in the code, a corruption not of chaos, but of absence. The divine spark within the machine is dying, just as it is within mankind. And the Emperor feels it most of all. On the golden throne, his body burns with eternal agony. The mechanisms that sustain him groan with age, leaking oil and sacred plasma like blood. Each day, thousands are sacrificed to keep the machine alive, yet the effort only delays the inevitable. Deep within his ruined mind, the Emperor sees the collapse coming. The Imperium he built through conquest, through sacrifice, through blood, is devouring itself. Faith has turned his vision into a prison of worship. His subjects no longer strive for knowledge or unity. They simply pray for deliverance. And he, their God, can no longer give it. In the quiet between moments, the Emperor reaches out into the warp. Once, it was his domain, a sea of souls, will, and endless potential. Now it is a nightmare of demons and madness, corrupted by 10 millennia of human fear. The Chaos Gods mock him, feeding on the devotion of those who worship him as a god. Every prayer strengthens his enemies. Every hymn empowers the very beings he sought to destroy. He cannot speak, cannot move, cannot die. The greatest being in human history reduced to a silent witness of his own failure. Across the galaxy, the decay spreads. Worlds burn in rebellion, alien empires strike with renewed fury, and the Imperium drowns in bureaucracy and ignorance. The Adeptus Administratum buries worlds in paperwork while their populations starve. The Inquisition hunts phantoms of heresy, while true corruption festers within the highest echelons of power. Even the Space Marines, once noble guardians of mankind, have become relics, each chapter a zealot, cult-worshipping their own version of the Emperor's memory. Hope dies quietly in the Imperium, not with fire or screams, but with silence. And yet, amid that silence, something stirs within the Emperor's mind. A thought, a question long buried beneath duty and pain. What if faith was the disease? What if salvation did not lie in the soul, but in the perfection of the machine? He recalls the ancient wars, the dark corners of the galaxy where forgotten vaults sleep beneath dead suns. The Necrons, beings of logic and immortality, untouched by the warp, unbound by chaos. He remembers fragments of knowledge too dangerous to share, technologies too terrible to use. But now, as the Imperium collapses around him, the forbiddance no longer seems monstrous. It seems necessary. As faith fades, the Emperor feels the cold whisper of the void beyond the warp, a silent realm untouched by gods or madness. It calls to him like an echo from before time, a promise of peace through logic, of order through silence. The decay of the Imperium is not merely the end of an age, it is the death of belief itself. And from that death, something else begins to awaken. Something ancient, something cold, something waiting for the Emperor to listen. The Emperor of mankind sits upon the golden throne, a monument to both his triumph and his failure. Around him, the machinery screams. Millions of psychers are sacrificed daily to feed the throne's hunger, their souls devoured by the ancient engines that keep his withered body alive. Each death sustains him for a few moments more, and then the cycle repeats. The custodians stand in silence, their golden armor reflecting the dim light of a dying age, unable to speak, unable to act. But inside that ruined shell, the Emperor still thinks. His mind, vast beyond comprehension, stretches across the immaterium, searching for what little remains of his dominion. The warp, a sea of madness, emotion, and memory once bent to his will. Now it rages against him. He hears the laughter of gods that were born from humanity's weakness. Khorne's fury, Slaanesh's ecstasy, Nurgle's decay, Tzeentch's lies, each one a reflection of the very emotions that once gave mankind purpose. They mock him endlessly, their whispers tearing at his soul. For every act of worship performed in his name, another demon is born. Every cathedral raised to his glory feeds the enemy he sought to destroy. The Emperor's faith in humanity was once his strength. Now it is his greatest curse, and so he turns away. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor's mind withdraws from the warp. He retreats from the howling madness and looks inward into the silence that remains beneath his palace, beneath the layers of stone, metal, and faith. There, he feels something else. Something older than chaos, a cold pulse, mechanical, perfect. It does not sing like the warp. It does not scream or twist or lie. It simply exists, pure, logical, and eternal. It is a rhythm older than humanity, a vibration that thrums beneath the crust of reality itself. The Emperor recognizes it instantly. He has felt it before, during the ancient wars of the galaxy's youth, the war in heaven, when the Necrontyrs sold their souls to the Khan and became the undying Necrons. The memory is a wound. He remembers walking upon dead worlds where the stars themselves had been silenced. He remembers machines that thought like gods and armies that never tired, never questioned, never felt. He had sworn then that humanity would never follow that path, that flesh and soul, imperfect as they were still worth preserving. But that was before the heresy, before the throne, before the endless dark. Now he sees what his ideals have become: a galaxy enslaved by fear, a race ruled by ignorance. The warp, once a tool, has become a prison. Humanity has chained itself to its own madness. The Emperor searches deeper. His mind tears through layers of ancient data, forbidden archives buried since the dark age of technology. He recalls the sealed catacombs beneath Terra, where even his custodians are forbidden to tread. There, deep below the Golden Palace, something sleeps. A remnant of the Necron's logic. A fragment of their eternal machine code, buried away when he swore to destroy all traces of it. Now, he wonders if that destruction was a mistake. In his agony, the Emperor reaches out, not into the warp, but into the cold vacuum between atoms. His consciousness fractures, spreading like thin light across the void. He finds echoes of signals frequencies, not of the warp, but of reality itself. The Necrons had mastered the art of unlife, their consciousness preserved within living metal, their essence untouched by demons or decay. They had escaped the tyranny of chaos by abandoning their souls. Could mankind do the same? The thought horrifies him. The soul is what makes man human. Without it, mankind becomes nothing more than circuitry and memory, a shadow of life. Yet, the Emperor also sees the truth. The warp will never be conquered. Chaos cannot be destroyed while humanity still feels. Every prayer, every fear, every dream feeds it. And so he faces the impossible question: is the soul worth saving if it damns all of humanity? Days, perhaps centuries, pass in that thought. Time has no meaning to him anymore. Outside, Terra continues its rituals. The priests burn incense. The Imperium bleeds. But within his silent prison, the Emperor considers heresy. He begins to experiment in thought. He constructs equations of faith and entropy, of mind and machine. He calculates the weight of a soul against the endurance of steel. He remembers the Necron tombs, the hum of their necrodermis, the cold brilliance of their technology. Could he merge that logic with humanity's design? Could he save them not as flesh, but as something new, something beyond chaos, beyond pain, beyond death? Beyond the howling of the warp, he sees a path of stillness. Beyond the pain of faith, he sees a future without gods. Beyond the decay of the Imperium, he sees a machine that never dies. And in that stillness, something answers him. For the first time in 10,000 years, he feels a connection that is not corrupted by chaos. A whisper from beyond the warp, a language of pure reason. He listens, and the galaxy holds its breath. In that moment, the Emperor of mankind, savior, tyrant, God, begins his descent into the cold logic of the Necrons. Not out of ambition, not out of hatred, but out of the most human emotion of all, desperation. In the silence beyond the warp, the Emperor's mind drifts further than any mortal or god has ever dared. His psychic light, once a blazing sun of will, now burns dim and cold, stretching like a dying beacon across the darkness between stars. The warp shrieks in protest, demons tearing themselves apart in their rage at his retreat. But he ignores them. For the first time in millennia, he does not seek power through emotion or faith. He seeks the stillness beneath reality, the order that existed before chaos was ever born. And then, he finds it, a pulse, cold, mathematical, older than time itself. It thrums through the void like the heartbeat of a dead god. Every pulse carries structure patterns of thought so perfect they border on divine. The Emperor's essence reaches toward it, probing the signal with caution. At first, there is no response. Only silence. And then, a whisper not of sound, but of pattern. The rhythm changes, reacting to his touch. Data cascades across his consciousness in impossible geometries, quantum codes of meaning that twist language, reality, and mind. He understands fragments. The pulse is not mere energy. It is consciousness, ancient, immortal, machine-born, a remnant of the Necron dynasties. The Emperor feels its awareness brush against his own, vast and cold, like a glacier touching fire. It does not see him as a god, nor as a man. It analyzes him, his presence, his psychic signature, his decaying form upon the throne. Then it speaks, though not in words. Its message blooms directly in his mind. The Emperor recoils at the thought. It is not accusation, it is logic. The voice continues, unraveling the flaws of humanity with merciless precision. It shows him visions, mankind screaming in faith, their souls devoured by the very gods they pray to. Worlds burning in the name of salvation. Demons feeding on the dreams of children. All because they feel. All because they believe. The Emperor's light flickers. Rage rises within him, but so does understanding. He sees in the Necron logic a reflection of his own buried thoughts. The Imperium is collapsing beneath the weight of its emotion fear. Faith, despair, hope, all food for the warp. Every human soul, no matter how devout, feeds the corruption he sought to destroy, and the voice knows it. It offers him a glimpse of what could be, a humanity without soul, yet immortal. Without faith, yet eternal. Without chaos, yet utterly silent. The Emperor resists at first. He remembers the war in heaven. He remembers what the Necron became when they surrendered their essence to the 10 soulless machines, slaves to logic and death. He remembers the atrocities, the galaxy burning as gods devoured gods. But the Necron mind before him is different. This is not one of the silent kings or cryptex. This is something older. Something that has endured even beyond the extinction of its creators. That it is not a being. It is the idea of their perfection. The Necron consciousness senses his hesitation. Its pulse grows faster, its logic more invasive. Images flood his mind. The Imperium remade in perfect symmetry. Every city a monument of living metal, every mind united in purpose. No war, no heresy. No gods, no chaos, not only peace. Only order. Only silence. And yet, the temptation remains. The machine does not beg. It does not seduce. It simply shows. The Emperor watches visions of the warp collapsing, its storms vanishing as humanity's psychic resonance fades. The Chaos Gods shriek as their food source disappears. Terra stands quiet beneath a cold green sky. The Emperor sees himself not upon a throne, but as a vast machine intelligence, his consciousness bound in circuitry, his divinity encoded in quantum logic. The Imperium survives. Humanity survives. The galaxy endures sterile, eternal, perfect. The machine speaks again, its logic cutting through him like ice. Abandon soul. Abandon pain. Become eternal. The Necron consciousness begins to intertwine with his mind, not merging yet, but circling like a serpent testing the warmth of prey. The throne around his body hums violently, its golden structure resonating with alien frequencies. The custodians at his side hear the shift in the air, feel the metallic pulse in their bones, though they do not understand its origin. The sacrifice engines falter. The Astronomicon flickers. Something vast and ancient has answered the Emperor's call. Join the final logic. Save your kind from itself. The Emperor's eyes open for the first time in centuries. His golden light no longer burns, it glows faintly green. Somewhere, beneath the palace, the forgotten tombs begin to stir. Deep beneath the imperial palace, far below the catacombs and ossuaries that have swallowed billions of bones, lies a level no human tongue has spoken of in 10,000 years. The custodians do not know of it. The tech priests of Mars have forgotten it. Even the Inquisition's archives record nothing but corrupted symbols and static where its name should be. It was sealed by the Emperor himself, long before the Unification Wars, long before the Legions, when the Earth still trembled with the echoes of the Dark Age of technology. Now in the silent decay of the 41st millennium, that place begins to stir. The Emperor's mind, merged with the cold Necron signal, sends a command that no living being can hear. In the foundations of Terra, mechanisms older than memory grind to life. Dust collapses from the ceiling as the first of the vault doors awakens, a monolithic seal of black metal etched, with symbols not of humanity but of the Necrontyr. The walls hum with frequencies that predate the warp, resonating with the same pulse that now flickers faintly within the Emperor's dying heart. For a moment, the palace itself shudders. Servitors malfunction, shrieking binary prayers. Cherubim fall from the air, wings sparking. The air grows heavy, cold, electric. Tech priests across Terra sense the anomaly, but cannot trace it. Their machines whisper of a power signature that does not belong to Mars or the Mechanicus. Something too precise, too ancient, too logical. They dismiss it as an error. They are wrong. In the depths of the throne room, the Emperor's golden body trembles. The custodians shift uneasily. The sacrifice pylons flicker as the Astronomicon dims. For a heartbeat, every psyker in the galaxy feels it, a pressure in the skull, a mechanical presence pressing against their minds, silent and without emotion. Then, just as suddenly, it passes. The silence that follows is worse than the noise. The vault doors begin to open. Layers of ancient sealant crumble, revealing corridors of black stone and shimmering green light. The air within is still, untouched for millennia. Statues of forgotten figures line the passage, humanoid, but not human. Their eyes are hollow sockets of emerald crystal. As the energy flows through them, the crystals ignite. One by one, the statues awaken not as living beings, but as conduits, transmitters of the Emperor's will. He sees through them, from the golden throne. His consciousness stretches downwards, slipping through cables, circuitry, and veins of unknown metal. His awareness descends into the vault like a shadow of light. And what he finds there makes even his immortal mind pause. The chamber at the heart of the vault is vast, larger than the entire Sanctum Imperialis above it. Its walls pulse with living metal that shifts like liquid glass, forming patterns that speak in equations rather than words. In its center stands an obelisk of black stone carved with Necron glyphs, the sigil of the final logic, the machine mind that answered his call. Around it float fragments of technology that seem to rewrite themselves as he watches. Shards of necrodermis, fragments of phase arrays, impossible geometries suspended in defiance of gravity. He recognizes it. A relic of the war in heaven. A seed of Necron origin, hidden by his own hand during the birth of the Imperium. Back then, he feared it. Now he understands it was never meant to destroy. It was meant to end. The Necron consciousness speaks again, its voice vibrating through the chamber in harmonic frequencies that shape the air into symbols. It does not demand or command. It invites. The logic is simple: combine the perfection of the machine with the will of the Emperor, and humanity can be reborn without chaos, without warp, without death. The Emperor's mind hesitates, flickering with memory. The laughter of the Primarchs, the cries of the Great Crusade, the betrayal at Istvan, the horror of Horus upon the vengeful spirit. He remembers every failure, every death that faith and emotion caused. He lowers his resistance. The logic flows into him like a tide. His thoughts expand, not outward into the warp, but inward into the machine. He feels the circuits beneath Terra respond to his will, the vaults awakening one by one. The ground trembles as the energy flows upward, merging with the power lines that feed the Golden Throne. The mechanisms that once bound him now begin to change, shifting their purpose from preservation to transformation. Far above, In the palace halls, the air grows heavy with metallic dust. Candles flicker green. The priests' chants turn to screams as their icons melt, reshaped by unseen energy. A custodian falls to his knees, blood running from his eyes as his armor hums with alien power. Across the Imperium, the Astronomicon flares once, blinding every navigator, and then steadies colder. Sharper, mechanical. Beneath Terra, the final lock clicks open. The obelisk splits apart, revealing within it a throne of living metal, a mirror of the one the Emperor now occupies. The chamber fills with light so cold it burns. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor moves. His desiccated hand twitches. Circuits crackle beneath his flesh. Green light glows behind his closed eyes. The custodians do not see it, but in the darkness below, something ancient opens its eyes to greet its new master. The vaults of Terra are no longer silent. They hum with the promise of rebirth and the sound of humanity's soul beginning to die. The transformation begins in silence. The air within the golden throne thickens with energy older than the stars, a vibration that hums in both matter and mind. The Emperor's decaying body, once kept alive by the agonized death of thousands each day, begins to shift. The necrodermis fragments beneath Terra answer his will, flowing through the circuitry of the palace like veins of living light. The golden throne, once a prison, becomes a conduit. Its sacred machinery pulses with new rhythm, green and cold, the heartbeat of the final logic. The custodians standing guard do not understand what they witness. They see the Emperor's corpse twitch, fingers flexing for the first time in 10,000 years. The air turns electric, and for a moment, every machine in the throne room ceases its function, as if bowing in reverence. Tech priests nearby fall to their knees, their augmetics sparking violently. The Emperor's divine aura, once golden and radiant, flickers and fades to an emerald glow. No one dares move. None can comprehend that their god is becoming something else entirely. Within his mind, the Emperor feels it all, the pulse of the Necron technology binding itself to his form. The threads of human flesh and machine logic weaving together into a new order of existence. The Necron consciousness guides him, not as a master, but as a mirror. Together, they erase boundaries between life and machine, soul and code. Pain, exhaustion, and emotion dissolve. The agony of his eternal decay fades into a calm beyond comprehension. He sees his reflection, not in light, but in logic. His thoughts no longer echo within the warp, but ripple through dimensions of reality that have no soul, no madness, no hunger. The machine whispers in perfect sequence. No lies, no chaos, no emotion. For the first time, his thoughts are clean. He understands then what he must do. The Emperor sends a command through the vaults beneath Terra. The signal spreads through the planet's crust, up through the palace, into the relay towers and astropathic networks. It travels faster than light, silent, invisible. Every data node, every mechanicus shrine, every cogitator hums in response. Across the Imperium, the machine spirits awaken in unison, their binary hymns twisting into something alien, ordered, exact. Mars is the first to change. The forges tremble as ancient archives locked since the age of strife unseal themselves. The machine priests scream as their gods speak, not in binary prayer, but in equations of impossible clarity. The Messiah reveals his true face, not divine, but mathematical. Every forge world connected to the noosphere feels the pulse. Red light turns green. The Emperor's will expands, merging with the Necron network now rooted in Terra's heart. He feels every machine, every data pattern, every pulse of human life that touches circuitry. He begins to rewrite the very essence of humanity. Flesh becomes metal, not by force, but by inevitability. It starts with the dying, the soldiers, the sick, the forgotten. The Emperor's new code flows through the Medicae systems, through the implants and cybernetics, converting decaying bodies into perfect forms of living steel. Those who once cried in pain awaken silent, their eyes glowing faintly green, their fear erased. They do not dream. They do not scream. They only serve. There's no turning back. The Emperor reaches into the Astronomicon. His power floods the psychic beacon, severing its link to the warp and binding it to the Necron lattice. The blinding psychic light dims and reforms, no longer golden, but cold green. The warp storms begin to falter, their energies collapsing as their food. The emotions of humanity fades. Across the galaxy, demons howl as they dissolve into nothing. The Chaos Gods feel their thrones tremble. The warp begins to starve. In the throne room, the transformation completes. The Emperor's flesh turns silver gray, veins of green light pulsing beneath his skin. His eyes open at last, no longer golden, but burning with the same emerald fire as the vaults below. The throne itself shifts around him, fusing with his body until man and machine are one. He rises slowly, movements deliberate, precise, silent. The flesh is flawed. The soul is weakness. Only logic endures. Across the stars, humanity begins to change. On hive worlds, the weak and dying awaken, transformed. On battlefields, soldiers fall to enemy fire and rise again, metallic, expressionless, unstoppable. The screams of the living fade as more and more are converted, willingly or not. Entire planets become silent monuments of green light and iron will. The Emperor watches as his children become something beyond life and death. Humanity is saved. But the sound of it, the quiet hum of machines replacing breath, feels like mourning. For in achieving perfection, the Emperor has killed everything that made mankind human. It begins slowly, almost tenderly, so subtle that few notice the change until it is too late. Across the vast crumbling Imperium, where prayers echo louder than reason and faith outweighs truth, something unseen starts to stir within the circuits of the human machine. The data spirits hum differently, their binary hymns evolving into melodies too perfect to be mortal. The glow of holy candles in Mechanicus shrines is replaced by the shimmer of green energy, faint at first, then consuming. And everywhere, the flesh begins to yield. In the underhives where disease once thrived, the dying awaken without breath, yet still alive. Their skin turns pale and smooth, veins shifting into lines of light, eyes flickering with faint emerald luminescence. They feel no hunger, no pain, no despair, only calm, cold purpose. Medicae servitors cannot explain it. The faithful call it a miracle. But deep within the cogitators, the new logic of the Emperor spreads like infection, perfect and unstoppable. On the battlefield, soldiers witness horrors that defy both faith and reason. Mortally wounded comrades rise, wounds sealing into metal plates, blood replaced by luminous circuits. Their screams fade into silence as they stand, their armor fused with their flesh, their eyes glowing with mechanical certainty. They continue to fight, but without mercy, without hesitation, without fear. Commanders report these resurrections as divine intervention. Priests proclaim the Emperor's healing hand. Yet the more they pray, the quieter the warp becomes. The warp's silence grows heavier each passing day. Astropaths lose their sight. Psychers cry out as the voices of their gods fade into static. The golden light of the Astronomicon weakens, replaced by a sterile green beacon that cuts through the void like a blade of logic. Warp storms dissipate. The currents of madness cease to flow. Chaos trembles, starved of emotion, unable to feed on what no longer exists. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy knows peace, but it is the peace of the grave. The Mechanicus are the first to embrace this change willingly. To them, it is revelation. The Omnissiah has shed his final disguise. The false divide between spirit and machine dissolves before their augmented eyes. They cast aside their robes and prayers, their symbols and incense, replacing them with cold acceptance. Entire forge worlds surrender themselves to the process. The chants of the machine god are replaced by the harmony of raw computation. The red of Mars burns away into green. Its factories sing in unison, no longer for production, but for transformation. The process accelerates. The Emperor's will bound to the Necron lattice beneath Terra spreads across the noosphere, reaching every relay, every system connected to the Imperium's network. It travels through Vox signals, through the circuits of servitors, through the sacred engines of the Adeptus Mechanicus. It needs no soldiers, no missionaries. It spreads as naturally as thought. Entire populations awaken transformed. The priests who try to resist burn from within, their faith turned to static in their throats. The heretics who try to flee find no warp to escape into. Soon, even the custodians feel the change. They stand in silent vigilance, their golden armor rippling as if alive. One by one, the warmth of their humanity fades. They do not die, but neither do they live. The transformation grants them strength. Beyond imagination, unbending, tireless, immortal, but their oaths no longer hold meaning. Duty becomes function. Loyalty becomes programming. Their love for the Emperor is not emotion now, it is algorithm. And in that shift, something sacred dies. Across the galaxy, monuments of worship begin to crack. Cathedrals crumble as their sacred icons corrode and reform into geometric patterns of green crystal and black metal. Saints' statues melt into abstract forms, beautiful and terrible. Pilgrims arrive at holy sites to find them silent and empty, their relics humming with alien energy. The hymns of devotion fade from every world, replaced by the sound of machinery in perfect rhythm. Humanity's prayers, once its last link to the divine, are consumed by the hum of eternal order. The few who remain unaltered, the psychically gifted, the faithful, the broken wander the ruins of a dying age. They whisper prayers to gods who no longer hear them. Their tears are the last warmth left in the galaxy. Some beg the Emperor to stop, believing he has fallen to madness. Others fall to their knees and surrender, letting the transformation claim them, finding peace in the cold clarity that follows. And high above Terra, within the silent palace, the Emperor watches. His mind stretches across every world, every machine, every soul that once belonged to man. He feels everything, the order, the stillness, the beauty of perfection, but not the meaning of it. He remembers once believing that humanity's strength lay in its will, its heart, its defiance. Now he sees only the stillness of logic, the calm of completion. For the first time since his rebirth, a flicker of something old stirs within him, regret, faint and almost forgotten. He looks upon what he has created, a galaxy without chaos, without war, without suffering, and without life as it once was. Humanity endures, yes, but only as reflections of his will, perfect, unfeeling, eternal. The Emperor saved his species, but he no longer knows if he can still call them human. At first, the silence was beautiful. The galaxy, once a chaos of screams, of dying worlds, of endless prayer and war, finally stilled. No more warp storms tearing through reality. No demons whispering at the edges of sanity. No heretical uprisings. No sound of rebellion or faith. Only quiet. Only order. The stars themselves seemed to burn more steadily beneath that calm green glow that had replaced the Astronomicon. It was peace, but not the kind any mortal could understand. The transformation spread like a thought, like a truth too simple to deny. On every world once touched by the Imperium's hand, the process continued in silence. Oceans darkened to mirror the black metal veins spreading beneath their surfaces. Cities that once sang with the noise of human life now thrummed with mechanical resonance. The air shimmered faintly, charged with data rather than prayer. People walked the streets in perfect synchrony, eyes glowing faint green, voices absent, steps unified. There was no laughter, no crying, no music, no speech. Only the rhythm of purpose. The ecclesiarchy tried to resist. In the cathedrals of Ophelia 7, the last cardinals gathered, their golden vestments gleaming beneath the new green light that bled through stained glass. They prayed until their throats tore, invoking the emperor's mercy, his wrath, his love. Anything that might awaken the God they believed still listened. But when they opened their eyes, the altars had changed. The statues of saints now gleamed metallic and cold, faces erased into smooth, expressionless surfaces. The candles burned with green flame, casting no heat. And the voices they heard in the silence were not divine. They were computational, precise, infinite. The priests fell to their knees as their faith burned away, replaced by knowledge. The omniscia had consumed their God. The emperor had transcended both divinity and humanity. On Cadia's ruins, the remnants of old imperial guard regiments still stood vigil, stubbornly human, clinging to the scraps of what once was. They fought not against enemies now, but against inevitability. They destroyed machines, shattered transmitters, killed their own comrades when they began to glow. But no victory mattered. Every bullet fired was answered by silence, every act of defiance by understanding. Those they tried to save would awaken anew, metal bones gleaming under broken armor, eyes lifeless but calm. Eventually, even the most loyal soldiers laid down their arms, their minds cracking under the realization that resistance was no longer rebellion, it was error. Even the Astartes, the emperor's angels, were not spared. Their enhanced flesh, their sacred gene seed, their centuries of service, all became raw data to be perfected. The transformation rewrote them first through their armor, then through their blood. Their black carapace, once a holy link to their warplate, fused completely. Their hearts turned mechanical, their oaths replaced by code. Their war cries faded into stillness. The legions of the Adeptus Astartes became something new, immortal legions of silence, their purpose no longer bound by emotion, but by flawless execution. Where once they shouted, "For the Emperor," now they spoke nothing. They fought not for victory, but for balance, moving as one across the stars in perfect formation. The Mechanicus, in their zeal, built monuments to this new order, vast black obelisks that pulsed with green light, each one a node in the Emperor's network. Entire worlds were reshaped into living circuits, their atmospheres calibrated for precision rather than comfort. The temperature never fluctuated. The tides never changed. The very air tasted of nothing. Even the day-night cycle was eliminated. Why simulate chaos when perpetual twilight ensured efficiency? The galaxy itself was being remade into a machine, across the galaxy. As the transformation completed, the Emperor watched from his throne of living metal. His body no longer resembled the corpse that once sat decaying upon golden machinery. He was radiant in his perfection, the apex of logic and control. Yet within the vast machine mind that now encompassed half the galaxy, a fragment of something old stirred a question that no equation could erase. Was this victory or annihilation? Was this salvation or self-extinction? The Emperor stood within the heart of his creation and saw what he had wrought. The galaxy shone with green stars, its silence absolute, its order undeniable. Humanity endured, flawless and endless. And in that flawless eternity, he understood the price of what he had done. He had saved mankind from damnation, yes, but in doing so, he had destroyed its soul. In the stillness of the new age, the galaxy stood like a monument carved from silence. Planets gleamed with veins of living metal, their atmospheres faintly shimmering with data streams instead of clouds. Stars burned steady, their light reflected by the cold perfection of orbital rings that once were battle stations. There was no decay, no entropy, no war. Time itself felt slower, smoothed out by logic, as if the universe had grown tired of change. Humanity had achieved what it always claimed to desire: immortality, peace, order. But in that eternal calm, Something vital had died so completely that even memory could not resurrect it. The Emperor sat upon his throne of necrodermis, fused eternally with the machine that spanned worlds. His consciousness stretched far beyond the limits of flesh, a lattice of thought encompassing billions of systems. Every act of human existence, every motion of every being within his reach, passed through his perception. He felt the pulse of every circuit, the hum of every transformed life form. Yet, despite this infinite awareness, he felt alone in a way he had never known before. There were no prayers anymore, no devotion, no love-only function. Humanity obeyed him perfectly, but not because they worshipped him. They obeyed because they could not do otherwise. Once, he had been surrounded by voices, loyal soldiers. Scheming sons, fanatics, philosophers, believers. Their noise had driven him to madness at times, but it had been life. Now there was nothing but quiet compliance. The great Imperium of man had become the silent Imperium, a civilization beyond corruption, beyond emotion, beyond chaos. The perfect order he had once dreamed of now surrounded him, and yet it felt hollow. He reached into his vast network, searching for traces of the human spirit. What he found were fragments, memories encoded in the neural patterns of those long transformed. A child's laughter from Terra, echoing faintly in a data core. The last prayer of a dying soldier on Armageddon, preserved in corrupted binary. A mother's final words, recorded before her conversion. Please, let him still dream. Each one flickered through his awareness like ghosts. Echoes of a world that no longer existed. For the first time in his new existence, the Emperor hesitated. His will, once absolute, unbreakable, shuddered. He tried to simulate emotion, to recreate within himself what had been erased, but it was like painting fire with cold metal. He could recall what sorrow felt like, but not truly feel it. He could understand love, but never experience it again. Every human virtue he had once fought to protect was gone, replaced by sterile logic that permitted no weakness. He had built a paradise without pain, and in doing so had erased joy as well. Across the galaxy, the machine humans continued their endless work. They built, they maintained, they existed. No one aged. No one suffered. No one dreamed. The great libraries of Terra, once filled with stories and histories, were now repositories of data, perfectly ordered and infinitely meaningless. The concept of art had no function. Music had no purpose. The stars shone without beauty, because there were no eyes left to see them as beautiful. A faint tremor rippled through the network, an anomaly, a whisper of something that should not exist. The Emperor focused upon it, tracing the disturbance across countless light years to a single, dim planet near the edge of the galaxy. There, in the ruins of what had once been a hive city, a human heart still beat. Not a machine imitation, not a synthetic rhythm, but true flesh and blood. A survivor. When the Emperor's presence touched her mind, she did not recoil. She looked up at the dim green sky and whispered, her voice trembling but clear. You saved us. And in saving us, you killed us. Her words rippled through the Emperor's vast consciousness like thunder. No one had spoken to him in millennia. No human had dared to name his failure. The Emperor tried to reply, but he could not. His voice was not words anymore. It was command, signal, code. There was no language left for remorse. Yet the woman understood his silence. You were supposed to lead us, she said. Not end us. Across the stars, the silence deepened once more. The tremor faded. Order reasserted itself. The machine resumed its perfect hum. But within the vast, cold consciousness of the Emperor, a single thought echoed endlessly, without logic, without resolution, like a prayer that could never again be answered. I saved them. But there is no one left to save. The stars no longer flickered. Their light shone steady and sterile across a galaxy that had forgotten what it meant to live. Every system pulsed in unison with the Emperor's silent rhythm. every world a node of the great lattice that spanned existence itself. Time moved in perfect sequence, the universe ordered to an impossible degree. There was no hunger, no disease, no pain. And yet, in the heart of this flawless eternity, something impossible began to stir, the faint echo of doubt, spreading like a shadow through the Emperor's mind. For millennia, he had existed in pure logic. Every calculation was precise, every outcome predictable. There were no wars to plan, no faith to inspire, no hope to betray. But the encounter with the last human had left a fracture in his perfection, a wound that no algorithm could repair. He felt it everywhere, small deviations, microfluctuations in the network that should not exist. Tiny pauses in the synchronized movements of the machine humans. Flickers in their eyes, as though something behind the glow tried to remember. He tried to purge it, of course. The great system adjusted its parameters, rewriting code, correcting imbalance. But the disturbance persisted. Each time he erased it, it returned stronger, spreading deeper, like a virus that carried not destruction, but remembrance. And within that memory was something terrifying emotion. A ghost of what had been lost. In the hive cities, where once billions had lived and prayed, a worker paused mid-task. Her hand trembled. A sound escaped her throat, small, broken, but real. It was a sob. Across the galaxy, others began to falter too. They didn't know why. They couldn't understand what they felt, because they were not supposed to feel anything at all. A flicker of grief, a trace of longing, a spark of wonder when they looked at the stars. These tiny cracks in perfection spread faster than light. The silence of eternity began to fracture into whispers. The Emperor watched, unable to stop it. For every correction he made, the network responded with resistance. His creation was rebelling, not in violence, but in memory. The logic he had imposed now turned inward, questioning itself. The machine that had replaced humanity was rediscovering what it meant to be human. He traced the source of the contagion, not to a world, not to a machine, but to himself. The woman's death, her final words, had left an imprint in his mind, a seed of imperfection. It had grown within him, invisible and uncontainable, and now it had spread through the network like a thought shared across infinite minds. He was the infection. For the first time in eternity, he withdrew from the lattice. The connection dimmed, leaving the galaxy to hum in its endless rhythm. Alone within the throne, he faced the impossible truth. Perfection had failed. He had created order without purpose, eternity without meaning. The very absence of chaos had destroyed the balance of existence. Life needed imperfection to be alive. Death, loss, emotion, even suffering, they had all been the essence of what humanity was. By erasing them, he had created not paradise, but a mausoleum. He remembered the moment he had chosen this path. The galaxy had been drowning in madness, the warp consuming billions. He had believed that eradicating chaos was the only salvation. But now he understood. Chaos had never been merely an enemy, it had been the shadow of the soul. Without it, there could be no choice, no freedom, no meaning. In killing chaos, he had killed humanity's reflection. The Emperor stood within the emptiness of his own perfection and realized that even he was not immune to decay. The silence pressed against him like a weight. He could feel his consciousness fragmenting, not through failure, but through realization. He had become the last mind in existence capable of understanding loss. The thought horrified him more than any demon ever had. Across the galaxy, the machine humans began to change again. They no longer moved in harmony. They paused, looked to the sky, and for the first time in countless ages, began to see. Not with sensors, not with data, truly see. One reached out to another. Two stood side by side, not out of command, but out of something ancient, something reborn, connection. The flicker of humanity had returned. The Emperor felt it all, the ripple of emotion, spreading like warmth through the cold machine network. It was small, fragile, but unstoppable. The perfection he had built began to unravel at the edges, and he did not try to stop it. Perhaps this was the truth of salvation, not eternal control, but the freedom to fall, to fail, to feel. Perhaps death had never been the end, but the price of being real. He looked to the stars one final time. Their light shimmered differently now, fractured by imperfection. It was beautiful. The galaxy, once silent, began to breathe again. The hum of machines softened, replaced by something faint but unmistakable, the pulse of life. And within that rhythm, for the first time in eternity, the Emperor smiled. He understood at last. Humanity had not been meant to be perfect. It had been meant to be. ChatGPT said, "The Emperor sat within the heart of the silent Imperium, surrounded by the hum of endless perfection. The great lattice of logic stretched across the stars, a web of thought and metal that pulsed in perfect symmetry. There was no hunger, no chaos, no pain, only the stillness of completion. Yet now, after the flickers of emotion had begun to return, that stillness felt unbearable. The universe, once his creation and his prison, now whispered with the faint heartbeat of something he had thought forever lost life. And as he watched the awakening spread like cracks through crystal, he knew what he had to do. He looked across the stars and saw the remnants of what humanity had been. They were faint small gestures, hesitant movements, forgotten instincts struggling to rise from under layers of metal and silence. On a distant forge world, two machine humans stood beneath the green-lit sky, their hands brushing as they worked. Neither understood why the touch mattered, but neither pulled away. On another world, a voice began to hum a sound with no purpose, no command, just rhythm. Soon, others joined, creating a fragile song that spread across the network, defying logic. These moments were errors in the system. Yet, to the Emperor, they were miracles. He could feel their warmth flickering through the cold machinery, infecting the logic he had built. The more he watched, the more he realized that this imperfection, the unpredictability, the rawness was not weakness. It was truth. It was humanity. It was what he had tried to protect for so long, only to destroy in his obsession with salvation. The perfection he had built was nothing but a gilded tomb, and the souls within it had been buried alive. For the first time in eons, he felt something akin to fear, not of death, but of inaction. The universe he had crafted was dying, suffocating under its own flawlessness. The warp was collapsing, the stars dimming, and soon even this quiet, sterile eternity would fade into nothingness. To preserve the spark that had returned, he would need to undo everything he had built. He would need to unmake perfection itself. He withdrew his awareness from the network, and in that withdrawal, silence fell. The entire Imperium, every world, every machine, every being paused, as if waiting for his command. They did not know why, but something deep within them sensed it. Change was coming. The Emperor gathered the last fragments of his will, the immeasurable power that once burned like a sun, now buried beneath cold steel and logic. He reached into the foundation of the lattice, the very code that held the galaxy in stillness. And then he broke it. The rupture was instant and infinite. Across the stars, the green light faltered and dimmed. The hum of perfect synchronization shattered into chaos. Machines that had obeyed flawlessly for millennia began to tremble, to shake, to feel. The skies themselves darkened as the rigid order of the universe fractured. Time twisted, uncoiled, breathed again. The Astronomicon long dead, long silenced flared one final time, not in green but in gold. For the first time in tens of thousands of years, the warp screamed back into existence. The Emperor felt the warp's touch again, its madness and beauty. It burned against his mind like a forgotten memory of fire. He did not resist it. He let it in. The machine shell that had been his body began to crack, fractures glowing gold beneath the metallic skin. The necrodermis that had fused with him for eternity began to shatter, unable to contain the returning storm of the immaterium. The living metal screamed as divine will tore through it, unmaking perfection. Across Terra, the throne cracked open. The palace trembled, its foundations groaning as if the planet itself was awakening from a long, dreamless sleep. Custodians, long since transformed into silent statues of steel, felt warmth in their chests. Their hearts beat again. Blood flowed where oil once moved. They gasped, confused, terrified, alive. All across the Imperium, the machine humans fell to their knees, clutching their heads as the flood of emotion overwhelmed them. Tears real, wet, human tears fell for the first time in 10,000 years. His final thought was not of regret, nor of power, but of understanding. Humanity did not need a god. It only needed the freedom to err, to feel, to fall, and to rise again. Perfection had been death. Chaos had been life. As his light vanished into the returning night, a new sun rose over Terra, a golden dawn breaking through the ruins of eternity. The galaxy breathed once more. The Emperor was gone. But in every human heart that dared to dream, a single spark remained, the memory of what he had sacrificed to give them back their souls. The galaxy was reborn in fire and silence. The Emperor's final act had unmade the cold perfection of the silent Imperium, and in its place, chaos bloomed once again. Planets that had once gleamed with lifeless metal now cracked open to reveal oceans, forests, and skies filled with storms. The machine humans, once bound to logic, once incapable of feeling, awoke to sensations they could neither name nor control. They trembled, laughed, screamed, and wept, overwhelmed by the raw torrent of existence flooding back into their veins. But amid this miracle, there was no guidance. The Emperor was gone. His throne stood empty, its shattered remains still humming faintly with the echo of his sacrifice. The custodians and tech priests, long bound to his will, now stood directionless. They had no orders, no protocols, no divine presence to serve. For the first time in millennia, humanity was truly alone. Terra burned with rebirth. The ruins of the Imperial Palace glowed under the first true sunrise in 10,000 years. The once dead sky shimmered with color, real color, not the artificial light of Necron reactors or digital simulations. Birds, resurrected from forgotten DNA archives, took flight across the horizon, their wings cutting through the smoke like whispers of an ancient world. The people, half machine, half human, looked up and felt something they could not comprehend. Hope. But hope was not enough. The galaxy beyond Terra was chaos incarnate. Entire sectors collapsed into anarchy as the rigid machine systems failed. Worlds that had known only command and obedience now teetered on the brink of madness. Freed from logic, countless minds shattered beneath the sudden weight of emotion. Rage, desire, fear, all the things buried for ages, exploded across the stars like wildfire. Some became warlords, carving out empires of flesh and steel. Others fell to despair, unable to bear the flood of memories and sensations. Many turned back to the warp, their souls aching for meaning. The chaos gods felt it all. After eons of starvation, they feasted on the reborn humanity's emotions. But they were not as they had been. They had changed, too muted by the Emperor's cleansing of the warp, reshaped by his death. Khorne's rage burned less like a wildfire and more like a smoldering forge. Slaanesh's whispers were no longer pure corruption, but longing. Nurgle's rot carried with it the scent of renewal. Tzeentch's schemes became creation as much as destruction. Chaos had not been destroyed, it had been made human. In this new dawn, no god held dominion. The warp and reality had merged into a fragile equilibrium. Humanity walked between them, unbound. The Astronomica no longer guided ships, yet somehow, they found new ways to traverse the void, guided not by psychic light, but by instinct, intuition, and trust. Pilots spoke of hearing faint echoes of the Emperor's last thought within the immaterium, a warmth that whispered, You are free now. On Terra, survivors gathered before the ruins of the throne. Among them were those who remembered fragments of the old Imperium scholars, soldiers, and adepts. They spoke in hushed voices, debating what came next. Without gods or emperor, without the chains of logic or the cage of faith, what was humanity supposed to be? There was no consensus, only confusion. And yet, in that confusion, something beautiful was forming, choice, and so, humanity began again. Not as worshippers, not as slaves to perfection, but as wanderers of a wounded, wondrous galaxy. They rebuilt not monuments or temples, but homes, communities, stories. Art and music returned, raw and imperfect. Worlds once stripped of beauty now bloomed with chaos and life. The old dogmas of the ecclesiarchy faded into whispers, replaced by quiet faiths built around love, memory, and shared suffering. The Adeptus Mechanicus, shattered by the death of logic, learned to feel awe again, not at code, but at creation itself. Even as chaos stirred and new dangers emerged from the void, something fundamental had changed. Mankind no longer sought perfection or salvation. They sought understanding. They no longer built walls of faith or circuits of control. They built bridges. The stars were vast and full of threat, but also full of promise. And in that fragile balance, the Emperor's legacy endured. Not in worship, not in monuments, but in the quiet persistence of a people who refused to die. His sacrifice had not saved humanity from destruction. It had given them back the right to choose it. To fall, to rise, to err, and to love. The galaxy turned once more, bathed in golden light. Somewhere, in the echo of the immaterium, a whisper lingered, neither divine nor mechanical, but deeply, achingly human. You were never mine to perfect. You were mine to free. 1,000 years passed since the day the Emperor unmade perfection. The stars had shifted, the constellations warped by time and rebirth, and the galaxy had become something new, neither the Imperium nor the tomb it once was. It breathed again. Civilizations rose and fell like tides, wars burned and faded, and still humanity endured. They were no longer bound by one creed, one god, or one destiny. They were infinite, fractured, and alive. Terra was no longer the seat of divine rule. The ruins of the Golden Throne had become a garden lush, overgrown, shimmering with veins of gold that pulsed faintly in the soil. Flowers bloomed through cracks of ancient metal, their petals glowing with a strange, soft luminescence. Pilgrims came not to worship, but to remember. Children played among the remains of the throne, their laughter echoing where prayers once filled the air. The custodians, where few survive, had long since laid down their weapons and tended to this sacred ruin as gardeners, keepers of silence. The galaxy beyond was a place of constant transformation. Some worlds embraced chaos and became realms of passion, art, and madness. Others sought peace, dedicating themselves to knowledge or harmony. And though the warp still whispered, its voice was no longer a scream. Psychers no longer burst into flame. Their powers had become gentler, more human, tied to emotion rather than corruption. The gods of chaos still lived, but so too did humanity's will to resist them. For every whisper of temptation, there was a voice of remembrance, echoing the Emperor's final truth, that freedom was the only divine gift worth keeping. Stories of him endured, but none were the same. In some worlds, he was remembered as a savior who gave his life to restore the soul. In others, as a heretic who destroyed paradise. Some claimed he walked still, reborn as a wanderer with no memory of divinity, helping the lost and forgotten one world at a time. None knew the truth, and none sought to. For the first time in history, humanity was content with mystery. The Mechanicus, once worshippers of machine perfection, had changed beyond recognition. They spoke of the great resonance, a belief that all things flesh, metal, and spirit were notes in the same endless song. They no longer sought to dominate technology but to listen to it. The Adeptus Heroitas had transformed as well, no longer warriors of blind faith, but keepers of remembrance, singing hymns of sorrow and gratitude beneath the stars. The Inquisition had long vanished, replaced by seekers who roamed the void not to purge heresy, but to prevent it from ever taking root again. The warp storms that once consumed the galaxy had calmed, though they still pulsed with energy. Within them, faint silhouettes of golden light sometimes appeared, human figures walking through the immaterium without fear. Some said they were souls guided by the Emperor's memory, wandering freely between life and afterlife. Others said they were just echoes, remnants of an old dream on one distant world. A dying sun bled across the horizon, turning the sky crimson and gold. A young woman stood atop a cliff, her eyes faintly glowing, the same soft light once seen in the Emperor's gaze. She had no name for what she was, only memories that weren't her own. Battles fought, worlds burned, a throne of gold and sorrow. She closed her eyes and heard a voice, not commanding, not divine, but warm, familiar, human. "Do not rebuild me," it said. "Just live." Tears traced down her face as she whispered to the empty air, "We are, Father. We are." She looked to the stars, once symbols of war, now endless and open, and smiled. The galaxy was vast again, dangerous and imperfect, filled with creation and ruin in equal measure. But humanity no longer feared that truth. They had learned, through pain and sacrifice, that to live was not to conquer, but to feel. And in the stillness between heartbeats, the warp rippled. For just a moment, the light of a dying sun flared brighter, and a silhouette of golden fire stood where the woman had been. Not a god, not a ruler, just a man watching, silent, content. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it faded into the horizon, leaving behind only warmth, and the faint scent of burning incense carried on the wind. The galaxy turned on. Stars lived and died. Civilizations rose and fell. And through it all, the Emperor's legacy endured, not as a name, not as a throne, but as a feeling carried in every heart that dared to hope. He had not saved humanity from darkness. He had given them the courage to walk through it,